Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in for this second episode. I apologize for it being a little bit in between episodes. I've been kind of busy the last few weeks, getting ready for this next chapter in life, packing up and just kind of getting ready to move to Missouri. And I've also had a few jobs here and there that's kind of kept me busy over the last few weeks. So for this last episode in Texas, I thought I'd just kind of talk about some things that I've been working on in the last couple of weeks and just some tips that I have picked up along the way. So the first thing that I would like to give you an advice of, that didn't make any sense, give advice for you, something. First tip I'd like to tell you, there we go. First tip I'd like to tell you is anytime you go out on a job that's like a videography job, I haven't had this trouble with photography, but it's never a bad idea. But anytime you're out on a job doing videography, and I would just say just anytime you go out on a job, it's always a good idea to have a backup camera, backup system in place. A couple of weeks ago I was fortunate enough to go film a wedding. Shout out to Charity and Ben McQuirk. And it was a great wedding. It was a great time. But as many of you know, we have been dealing with just some unseasonably and unreasonably and just flat out disrespectful heat here lately. And I've always heard that whenever you go to a wedding, any kind of big photo shoot, and you should treat all photo shoots equally as important, but especially a wedding day, something that is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, that it's always a good idea to have a backup camera. And I was never really sure as to why. I've got a really nice camera, shout out Canon, but I've never had any issues with it. But at this last wedding, it was so hot, my camera did shut down multiple times throughout the ceremony and the reception. Fortunately, I had a backup system, a backup camera going the whole time, so I didn't miss any shots. So that was the very first tip. As soon as the wedding was over, I was like, man, I gotta tell my YouTube people, always carry a backup system if you're going to a photo shoot. So tip number one, backup systems are critical and they can be lifesavers. All right, tip number two, I've been doing a lot of time-lapse videos here lately. Time-lapse videos can be really cool and they can be used for multiple things. So for my purposes, I like to just use time lapses to kind of show what happens throughout the course of a day, or what happens there over a period of time. And just like any of my other shots, I like to experiment with different angles. If I am getting a time lapse of some people walking by, I may get a low angle or a Resident Evil angle, as I call it, kind of up in the corner, kind of pointing down at people. Time lapses. Okay, so time-lapse settings is something we need to talk about. How frequently do we need to take these pictures? Think of it this way. The shorter the intervals, the smoother the time-lapse is going to be. So if I was to go a 15-second time-lapse, that's going to be really, really choppy. It's taking a picture every 15 seconds. What I like to do is I like to stick anywhere in between the 2 and 5 second range. That's going to make a nice smooth time-lapse video. Generally, I like to go in between 2 to 3 seconds. Okay, so time-lapse settings, 2 to 3 seconds, and experiment with different camera angles. Now, another thing that I like to do, and something I've just figured out on my DJI Mavic, is time-lapse on a drone. And it's pretty cool. You can get some really interesting shots like traffic. I got some traffic time-lapse the other day, or sunrise. You know me and sunrises and sunsets. I love photographing, taking photographs of sunsets and sunrises. But time-lapse on a drone can absolutely kill a drone battery. Okay, so again, the same intervals, 2 to 3 seconds generally, 5 seconds at most. And if you do it for about 15 minutes or so, you're going to get a decent little 8-second, 6-second time-lapse video. But time-lapse absolutely destroys your drone battery. So anytime you're going to do a time-lapse with a drone, you need to make sure your battery is completely charged. And whenever you go to set the settings, generally on my DJI, it's going to tell me if I've got enough battery life or not to pull the whole video. But if it doesn't, just be aware of your battery life and realize that before your video saves, it has to convert all those pictures into a video file. So you need to land and come back down with plenty of battery life and for your drone to do that as well. Okay, so time-lapse videos, 2 to 3 second intervals, 5 seconds at max. If you're doing it with a drone, make sure you've got a fully charged battery. Okay, fully charged battery. If you're doing it with the camera, like a DSLR camera or something like my Canon here, I would recommend having an external power source and not relying on your battery. Because generally if you're going to use a camera, you're going to do a time-lapse for a long period of time. And just like on the drone battery, every time that shutter shuts, it's going to use up battery life. Okay, so if you're shooting a time-lapse with a DSLR camera or something, I would recommend doing an external power source. Okay, so now on to the next thing I've been doing a lot of here lately, and it was actually my first passion in photography, and that's drone photography and drone videography. Now, one thing that we'd like to do as soon as we start flying is we like to fly as high as possible. We like to get all the way up to 400 feet, and we like to just test as high as we can fly. And that's great for some shots. Like later today, I'm going to go out and get some shots of one of the local lakes for a client. And I'll have to get completely 400 feet up to get the whole shot of the lake in. But you don't always want to be at the highest max altitude. It's not always going to give you the shot you want, and yet it may be fun to fly and you may be able to see a lot of things from a bird's eye view. But a bird's eye view is not always required. And if you think about it, birds fly at different altitudes as well. They're not flying at the same altitude the whole time. So just like camera work on the ground, you're going to want to experiment with different angles, but also different heights and altitudes. One thing I forgot to mention whenever you're flying a drone and doing time-lapse videos, if you're doing a time-lapse video of a sunset, generally you don't want your focus to be on the sun, because what's going to happen is it's going to kind of whitewash your video. And yes, in post you can go back down, you can bring the highlights back down and stuff like that. But generally what I do on a time-lapse for a drone is I'm going to focus on the horizon, or I'm going to get at the clouds that are on the horizon if I'm lucky enough to have any clouds on the horizon. I'm going to focus on the clouds rather than the sunset. Okay, that's going to help kind of darken the video and not give you so much whitewash. So now let's talk flying a drone. Okay, so flying a drone for videography purposes. We talked about photography. You want to kind of check your altitude, test different altitudes, test different angles. The same is true whenever you're doing videography with drones. Very, very rarely whenever I'm flying a drone for videography am I anything above 150 feet. Generally I'll stay around 100 feet. And one of the more important things to note whenever you're flying your drone is you want to know how high your power lines are at in your town. Because the last thing you want to do is fly your drone into a power line and kill your drone, but also take down power for part of the city. Okay, so that's how people hate us droners, is by doing stuff like that. So always be aware of how high your power lines are at, and also be aware of any obstacles that you may be facing while you're flying. I generally, before I get in the air, I'm going to look around and see what's around me so that I know what I've got to be able to look out for, and generally what heights those obstacles are at. So obstacles and knowing your altitudes for those obstacles is very, very, very important whenever you're flying a drone. Now I'm going to assume that you know your movements. This is not a drone instructional video. This is just tips. Okay, so, well, let me go get my drone real quick and my controller, and I'll show you a little bit better as to what I'm talking about. Alright, that sun's coming up. Alright, so, controller. So what I wanted to talk to you about whenever you're flying a drone for videography purposes is your inputs, your movements on the joysticks. Anytime you're flying for videography purposes, you want to be really small and really smooth on the inputs. Okay, whenever I'm putting in my inputs, I'm see if I can do this here. I'm barely moving my inputs. And you want to be smooth, okay? You want to be smooth on your inputs. And very rarely do you want to jerk it. You never want to jerk it, okay? Always smooth and small inputs. Some people use what's called the pinch method, and it gives you a bit more precision over your movements. In fact, that's how most racers hold their sticks, is using the pinch method. Okay, so just remember, whenever you're flying for videography, small, smooth inputs. Simple as that. All right, so that's about all the tips I got for you this week. Small inputs whenever you're flying your drone. Always know what obstacles you've got around you, what altitudes those obstacles are at. For time-lapse videos, you want to stay in between 2 and 5 seconds. I generally stay between 2 and 3 seconds. And then anytime you go to an important shoot, and remember, all shoots are important, but especially shoots like weddings, take a backup system. All right. So those are your tips I'm bringing to you this week. Last week here in Texas. I hope you stay with me throughout this journey. Last week we kind of talked about stepping outside your box and kind of chasing that dream. This week I want to end with supporting those that are stepping outside that box. It's very important to support your friends and your family. Anytime people make a big move or a big decision, anytime you step outside your box in order to grow for personal use or for whatever, people are going to question it. They're going to ridicule that. But if it is something that you believe in and it's something that you want, then don't let what those people have to say bring you down, and don't let it influence you in any way. If it's something that you want, then go out and get it. Okay? Now, we need to be better at supporting each other. Just because somebody makes a decision that you may not agree with, that does not give you the right to poo-poo all over their idea, or to bring them down, or to be a negative Nelly. Especially if they're your friends or your family, then you need to be supporting your friends no matter what. So it's very important to encourage them, let them know you've got your back, and just kind of spread as much love and positivity as you can, because anytime you step outside your box, you're going to have doubts. You're going to wonder, is this the right thing that I need to be doing? Did I make a mistake? You're going to have a lot of inner dialogue, and a lot of that inner dialogue is going to be questioning yourself. But never let it bring you down. Always let that questioning push you forward. And don't let what other people think or say influence you. If you're stepping outside your box to go get something that you want, then go get that. All right, guys, I thank you for tuning in today. I hope you got a little something out of the video. We'll be leaving this weekend, so I will be recording our journey. It's about a 12-hour drive. Me and Lainey will be going by ourselves. So I hope to see you soon. Until then, be kind, spread love, and I'll see you soon.